Hello, this is Jackie B. Peterson, author of Better, Smarter, Richer, 7 Business Principles for Encores, Creatives, and Solopreneurs. I'm glad you could join us this morning on Solo Pro Radio. And I would like to tell you just a little bit about Better, Smarter, Richer if you don't know. Better, Smarter, Richer is a fill-in-the-blanks workbook that outlines the 7 principles that solos need to follow in order to create the financial success they're looking for in their solo businesses. Solo businesses are distinctly different from traditional businesses where you hire employees and pretty soon what you know is you're spending your time managing employees instead of doing the work that you love and the work that you started your business to do. So when you're a solo, there's some things that you have to do to find success and not drive yourself crazy by doing all the admin and the work of your business that has to be done in any business. Only you're going to find a different way to do it rather than by hiring employees, which is what's the traditional route. So anyway, go to my website, bettersmarterricher.com, download the free ebook, tune into the podcasts, which are on the website from past shows, participate in the blog. We have a very active blog on the website, and also check out the calendar for various places that we'll be. I'm going to be doing a free symposium about the 7 principles at the Portland Community College Small Business Development Center on April 16th from 6 to 9 p.m. All you have to do is follow the link and sign up to be there, and we'd love to see you. So today for our show, I'm going to be talking with Holly Pruett, and Holly says that she arrived at just the right place without knowing it was where she was headed. Sounds like a lot of us, but what a journey. Holly spent many years as a nonprofit leader and consultant, and she decided she wanted to do something more important and meaningful in her life. She wanted to help people stories. So Holly has reorganized her life, spent 8 months training in ceremony design and delivery, and is now a certified life cycle celebrant. Let's welcome Holly Pruett. Hello, Holly.
Hey, Jackie. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm delighted that you're here. I know the first time that we met, I was so interested in the job, the career as a celebrant that I hope we're going to talk a lot about that. But before we get to that, tell us about you. Like, where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? And what did you study? And what was your first career?
Well, I grew up with my mom and sister way back in Connecticut, but I spent my summers in Hawaii where my dad lived. So when it came time to go away to college, I chose someplace halfway in between each set of parents, or maybe 3,000 miles away from both, in Portland, Oregon, where I have loved living ever since. I was a history major at Reed College, which, of course, qualifies you for nothing but being a teacher or an academic. But my focus was on oral history and social and cultural history, the way that everyday people make sense of their lives rather than the stories of the great men of history and the stories that people leave behind. So while I didn't know it then, it was actually a great background for the work that I do today. But at the time that I graduated, I just wanted to jump in and save the world. I had started volunteering on a women's crisis line, and that led me into 25 years of working as a social change advocate and political organizer.
Wow, that's really interesting. Did you work for a government agency doing that?
No, I worked for nonprofits. I started by running peer support groups for battered women and community education programs, and then I was the lobbyist for a coalition of 70 women's rights groups. And over my career, I did 2 different stints of 5 years each as executive director. The first for a network of rape hotlines and domestic violence programs, and the second for a children's advocacy organization. Also
Wow.
in there, I spent about 2 years running a statewide ballot measure campaign, and for 3 years, I worked in a public relations firm specializing in public interest organizations.
Wow, what an interesting background. So, I'm thinking of how that ties to your focus on oral history and social and cultural history that, here you were working with, working with people who very much needed your help and probably had some amazing stories to tell.
Absolutely. Yeah, from that very first job when I was working at Bradley Angle House Battered Women's Shelter. I had this unique opportunity to sit in support groups and hear the stories of these women's lives, and then run community and professional education programs where I was able to tell their stories out in the community, confidentially, of course, but in a way that really helped to broaden understanding of this as a social issue and helped to equip all of the first responders who at that time really didn't have very much information about the reality of what this was like in women's lives.
Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. I have a woman who's been a radio guest a couple times who wrote a book that she put together. It's called Wisdom from Under the Bridge. And she put it together by interviewing people who were homeless people on the street. And her thesis, her idea, similar to what you're talking about, where she thought, we really need to know our fellow human beings who are, in this situation where they're living on the street. And in each of her stories, there is wisdom. And, her point of view is, goodness, everybody has wisdom to share. Everybody has life lessons. Everybody has something to tell us. Everybody has a life story that is worth reading. And it sounds like you and she are kind of on the same page with that you brought forth people's life stories.
Right.
And their actual circumstances.
Once, and through your introduction, Jackie, through the program, and her work as an author it's similar to my work as a celebrant, where we can honor people's stories, and in the case of my work, we tell those through ceremony.
That's just wonderful. I love particularly, Holly, that you have focused on the people, not just on the famous men of history, and but the people who were making up, because we make up what really happened. So that's so cool. So you said you've also been a consultant. Was that also part of this work?
Yeah, about 10 years into my career, I got a master's degree from the Leadership Institute of Seattle, which was really about taking a step back from the daily life in nonprofits and campaign organizations so that I could learn about the ways that change happens within an organization. I was working for these organizations that were trying to make change happen out in the world, but how do you have an effective organization? And that led me to work as a solopreneur consultant, which is work that I do continue on a part-time basis today, focused on organizational development for nonprofits and public agencies. So that includes strategic planning and facilitation and board development and project management. And then with my additional background in communications, I also provided writing, editing, and communication services to public interest organizations.
Fantastic. That's very good. I think we are in kind of the rise of the recognition of the value that nonprofit organizations bring to our communities and to our society, and they need good OD. I mean, they need good leadership, they need good management skills, they need good strategic planning. I would say you're fitting into this very well.
And what we're also finding is that they need attention to the heart and soul and culture of the organization as well. It's so easy just to be focused on the organizational output and the organizational processes, but these are people who have put their heart and all of their spirit into the mission of the organization, and that can create some pretty tender circumstances. So I'm really loving opportunities to bring the two sides of my career together when I can actually work with organizations to incorporate some appropriate ceremonial elements into a strategic planning day, for example, so that people really feel their spirit nurtured and they leave feeling stronger within the culture of their organization. So it's really
that's
cool,
fabulous.
Those two sides together.
What it sounds like is just as we're trying very hard in the the for-profit business side of our communities to bring the hierarchies down, to create flat organizations and to work with people, and that we don't do things to people, we do things with people. it sounds to me like you're doing exactly that with nonprofit organizations, that, they are working with their clients to bring about fabulous change and structural change in their lives. Important stuff.
Yes, great parallel. And I've really enjoyed, whether I was working internally in a nonprofit organization or as a consultant and now as a celebrant, I see myself as a creative partner with my clients or with my coworkers, where it's all about what we are making happen together.
I love that. And I can see how that would move into your life as a celebrant as well. But let's talk a little bit more about that. So after all this very high level, powerful work, you decided that you wanted to do something different. So how did that decision come about?
Well, I really feel so grateful for all of the organizational work that I've been able to do with all of the great, important causes. But I hit a point of burnout. And I'd say one big clue was that I woke up crying every day. Realized that's not my personality. Something's wrong here. And I'd really been focused on these large-scale campaigns, change that could be legislated and budgeted and have to be recontested every 2 years in the state legislature or through the election cycle, campaigns that involve thousands of people. And I realized that I was yearning for work that would just connect me more deeply to people's lives, to the ways that we make meaning with each other, to things that are perhaps a little bit more durable than what gets contested in the political arena, as much as I value the importance of that work.
I can understand that. Sometimes at the big level or the organizational level, or if you were doing statewide campaigns level, you just wonder if you've actually really made any difference at all. And, what you've done now is moved into one by one, making a difference in people's lives. So, so what made you choose a career of being a celebrant? And let's talk about that. I think this is juicy stuff.
Well, I had never heard of it, and I had that longing to work with people more personally. I knew I didn't want to go back into the kind of direct social service that I'd done at the very beginning of my career in the battered women's movement, but I didn't really know what else was out there. But at the time, a friend and I, she was also at a transition point, were making kind of a personal study on the topic of green burial, how you might choose to go out if you don't want embalming and to put a lot of metal and other products into the earth. And we were actually considering the idea of opening a natural burial ground here in Portland. And through that, I met a life cycle celebrant, Melissa Coe, who was also interested in seeing more eco-friendly burial options developed. And when Melissa told me about her work as a celebrant, I realized that it brought so many strands together for me. And perhaps the most significant strand was another longing that I'd had that I hadn't even fully been able to articulate, and that is for more ceremony around the major rites of passage that I had been through in my life. Most significantly, about 10 years prior to that, when my father had died at the end of a long illness. And I'd been a part-time caregiver for him for a year and a half, but when he died, there was no funeral, no memorial. This was his request. I received a yogurt container with a part of his ashes, and that was it. I was on my own to figure out
Wow. That must have been terrible, actually. The loss of a parent is such a huge thing, huge passage in your life. So that really drove you.
Yes, and so about 6 months later, I prevailed upon a friend who had some background in ritual to help kind of create the container for me. I knew a lot about event design through all of the facilitation I'd done, so I had a sense of some of the elements that I wanted, but I didn't want to be the MC of my own father's memorial, and so I prevailed upon a friend. And I realized when I found my way to celebrancy that I actually had been kind of figuring out memorial and ritual on my own, but I really hadn't had a context to understand much about it or to realize that that's what I was doing. And so once I found my way into the program, I was able to look back and say, wow, here's some places in my life I really could have benefited from this. And, here's some creative things that I actually was doing that I didn't even call it ceremony or ritual at the time. So I can draw on both those, the lack of support and also kind of the creative ways that we can DIY, do it ourselves, work with my clients today.
Mm-hmm. So is being a celebrant a new career? I mean, is this kind of a new path that people are taking? Has there ever been such a category before?
Well, the word celebrant does come out of religious tradition, but the category of civil celebrants was actually established by the Australian government in 1973, so it's just 40 years old, and they were looking for an alternative to the clergy and the judiciary to marry people and bury people in Australia. And today the majority of weddings and funerals are officiated by civil celebrants in Australia. But it was in 2001, not even 15 years ago here in the United States, that a group of women in the New York City area who had been to Australia and knew about the movement there brought it to the U.S. and with the full blessing of the Training Institute in Australia, they established the Celebrant Foundation and Institute based back in Montclair, New Jersey. And since that time, they have graduated nearly 900 life cycle celebrants, which is the specific certification that they offer and which I obtained. Right now, there are celebrants in about 35, certified life cycle celebrants in about 35 states and about 8 countries around the world, including our neighbors, Canada and Mexico, but also several European countries and even Japan and Vietnam. And in 2007, they garnered the attention of CNN and Money Magazine, which categorized the celebrant profession as the number 3 best job for those over 50 and ready for a change.
Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
That's just quite amazing. And I'm I've done so much around encore entrepreneurship that's interesting to me that it's like the number 3 best job for people over 50, and yet, I can understand that. I think that's when people really finally claim, and manifest their lifetime wisdom.
Yeah.
What they have learned. And, this, I think I'm making this up. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm making up that it might be a little more difficult for somebody, say, in their 20s who doesn't have a whole lot of life experience to be really good as a celebrant, whereas people in their wiser years might have a wellspring of life experience to draw from, a maturity and wisdom to draw from that would help make this a richer career and richer ceremonies. Is that right?
I think that one of the functions that celebrancy can serve is that we've really lost touch with elders in most parts of our culture here in the U.S., that we may not be living with our multi-generational families or relationships have changed. And so you're right that the collective wisdom that we hold about ways that we can observe our rites of passage, that it's just not very available. And I think there are some very exceptional younger people who may serve as celebrants very beautifully because they've really found ways to tap into that collective wisdom, but that you're right, it's probably more naturally part of the path of those of us who have been through a lot of life experiences and have experienced both what's lacking and also what's rich, that we can help bring that to the base of what our clients can draw from.
Yes, very much. So now you trained to become a certified life cycle celebrant, is that right?
Yes.
And so what do you study and how long is the program and on and on. So talk to us about that.
Sure. It was such a fabulous program. I'm happy to share with folks because there are a variety of training programs out there. Anyone can use the word celebrant in either a religious or a secular context, and some of the training programs out there they may be a day or a week-long workshop, but the Celebrant Foundation and Institute it's really the gold standard. It's an 8-month course of study, which is done in a very interactive online format. I spent probably a day to 2 days a week engaged in the course of study during the time that I was in the program. And it starts by providing an extensive background in the theory and function of ceremony and ritual, and then offers specialization in different parts of the life cycle. So that could be weddings and ceremonies of commitment, funerals and other end-of-life ceremonies, ceremonies for transition and family life, and there's actually a new certificate focused on ceremonies for healing, and I contributed some of my case examples into the curriculum for that new certification program. We're also required, as part of the Celebrant Foundation and Institute training program, to undergo a professional vocal evaluation so that they can ensure that every celebrant that they are graduating knows how to speak to a room and hold people's attention and engage them. And we create multiple ceremonies during the course of the training program that are subjected to a rigorous peer and faculty evaluation program. So along with being very rigorous, one of the things that I loved was that the program is so collaborative. Again, really tapping into each other's collective wisdom. And that doesn't stop with certification and graduation. We have a very active network of professional colleagues who consult with each other on a daily basis.
What made the program collaborative, Holly?
Mm-hmm.
What made this program so rich and collaborative for you?
Well, during the course of the training program, every week we were required to comment on each other's work and also to contribute to collective brainstorms of elements for ceremonies that might apply in a particular circumstance. And that has continued through the alumni network. I have every day this fabulous interaction with a worldwide group of colleagues through an internal Facebook group that probably has 10 to 20 posts a day where we are sharing client scenarios with each other and seeking resource ideas, and also able to talk about the scenarios that come up professionally in terms of our business management, really similar to the networks that you support, Jackie. But in terms of ceremony content, it provides this incredible behind-the-scenes asset for each of our clients that we're able to tap into that rich library of collective wisdom of all of our professional colleagues.
Oh, I think that's absolutely wonderful. I think to be able to draw upon a group of other practitioners and other people and talk about a situation where you say, I've got this happening, or my client has this happening. Have you had this happen before? How did you handle it? What did you do? Is just fabulous. Besides that, getting the feedback of on your own celebrations, your own ceremonies that you would create. So someone would say, oh, man, that was terrific. I hadn't thought of that idea. I think I'll use that. Really helpful. Everybody benefits when we get that kind of a network going.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So talk to me about what kind of work a celebrant does. What do you do?
I work with my clients to create and officiate totally unique and personalized commemoration of any of life's important milestones. I say from cradle to grave, pretty much covers it all. And what really distinguishes a life cycle celebrant from, for example, a clergy person is that the ceremonies that we create reflect the client's beliefs and personality and philosophy of life and not the celebrant's. So there's no kind of cookie cutter, there's no playbook. And in that regard, it's very similar to my organizational consulting work in that I start with my clients by identifying what needs to be celebrated, mourned, released, honored, remembered, strengthened, diluted, whatever it might be. And then I design a process that incorporates their values and beliefs, their customs, their heritage to meet whatever their goals are. And as a celebrant, that process results in a ceremony, which I typically officiate if that's their desire. But I really am more than an officiant. I'm really a coach who engages my clients in that creative process we talked about that helps them meet their goals through ceremony.
Oh, that's just wonderful. That's just wonderful. I love that. So, we've all heard of the traditional things, the baptisms, the weddings, funerals, bar mitzvahs, things like that. But what other occasions are people celebrating? What has been your experience?
Well, I'll give you some examples, but first I want to note that many people are actually skipping those very ceremonies that you just mentioned because they're no longer connected to the religious institutions that offer those rites, or they're dispersed from the multi-generational families who used to organize the ceremonies that connected people to their heritage. So we provide what a friend called for me new way to walk through many of those old portals. So I've baby blessings, for example, or coming-of-age ceremonies for those observing who aren't observing those rites of passage in a church or a synagogue or a mosque. I create a lot of really unique celebrations of life for those who don't find the value in the traditional offerings of the funeral industry. More and more people are saying, don't waste any of our money on, they go to these funerals and they're impersonal. Sometimes the name isn't even said right. And
yes, we've all been to those.
Kind of a bad brand. So we're reinventing that. But I've also created ceremony with clients facing divorce, midlife crisis, in one case trouble with the law, illness, retirement, and also with whole groups or communities of people who faced loss, for example. So sometimes the ceremony is collective. Celebrants help with new business openings, with house cleansings and blessings, really anything that needs commemoration or celebration. And I'll just give you a few quick examples to give you a sense of the diversity of my clients. This week alone, and what is it, only Wednesday, so already I've received inquiries for a wine country wedding, which is sort of standard, but this happens to be from a couple that's living in the Netherlands. And
oh, wow.
Is that long distance. I received an inquiry for a retirement ceremony and for a consultation on home funerals, which I'm also certified to guide, which is about being able to actually keep the deceased body at home and go through the grief ritual there together. That's this week so good. Last week, one of the most extraordinary experiences of my career as a celebrant to date was working with the Oregon Zoo to create a respectful and very private ceremony to reinter the remains of 9 individuals who were inadvertently discovered during construction. The whole hillside occupied by the zoo today had been a poor farm in the 19th century. These were unmarked graves, and the remains were inadvertently discovered, and we laid them to rest in a very respectful ceremony that brought a sense of closure to all those who've been involved in that discovery. And that's kind of an extreme example of one of my mottos, which is it's never too late, because people often have regrets about the ceremonies they didn't do. And one woman contacted me saying when her mother had died 19 years previously, the funeral had been something, she said, that was like a bad Seinfeld episode. She said it was, good for a party story, but not much more. And so she commissioned me to create a memorial celebration for her mother who died 19 years ago.
Oh, my. Wow. What's coming up for me, Holly, as you talk is if we don't mark many of these that are very life-changing events, they can be with us for a very long time. They can haunt us. They can be in our thinking because we didn't honor them and bring them to closure as we should have. Yeah. And, it stops us from going forward.
Another way to think about it, besides that closure, and I think you're absolutely right, that really we can be stopped in our tracks, but working with a celebrant can, in some ways, do more than bring closure. It can bring opening. especially when those things have been kind of stuck, it's a way to move through them. And so for many people, they say, wow, I thought this was going to be an ending, but now I'm seeing what it is opening a door to.
That's true. That's a wonderful way to put it. Wonderful way. So do you find that recognizing life transitions is growing in people's awareness, and this is growing in popularity, if you will?
Well, there certainly is a big need for it. We are increasingly secular, and where I'm located here in the Pacific Northwest, we are the least churched part of the country in the U.S., and there are a lot of folks who consider themselves spiritual. They're seeking meaning. They're seeking connection to the sacred, connection to each other. A lot of families are interfaith, or they're multicultural. There's no one tradition or heritage that can kind of contain the different important events that they're experiencing in their lives. But in terms of there being a lot of people seeking this out professionally, we Life Cycle Celebrants often say we're not in competition with each other so much as in competition with the lack of ceremony and ritual in our culture these days. And so a lot of people have this vague sense of something that they need, but like myself, they don't even know what to call it. They don't know where to find it. They don't know who could help them. And it's not yet as fully valued in the marketplace. If you think of a wedding, for example, and of course the average wedding, tens of thousands of dollars, but that spending is on the venue and the dress you're only going to wear once and the food that's going to be eaten right away and the flowers that will die in a few hours. But the piece that really is the heart of the wedding, of the marriage, that ceremony that's about what the two are committing to, what they're asking others to witness, the threshold that they're crossing. There might be sticker shock if they think they need to pay more than $250 for an officiant, for example. So it's similar to funerals. Again, lots and lots of spending on all of the hardware, essentially. But the piece that's really going to capture the value, provide the most meaning, people aren't used to actually recognizing this as a professional service because, again, clergy who were funded through their religious institutions would be able to offer this for perhaps a small honorarium. So I think there's an enormous appetite, but we're very much at the beginning of having professional services in this arena recognized for the value that they bring.
Yes, I can understand that, and I can understand that people would think if you gave the officiating clergy person, a couple $100, they had done their job, and there was no other cost involved. But and then they complained that there was no person, there was no meaning, there was maybe no depth in the ceremony, but never linking the two. That they go together. If you're going to get a professional celebrant, there's a professional price to be paid. Yeah. So do you how do you work with your clients? So you've gotten these inquiries today, and what are the steps? What do you do?
Well, I start by offering a free, no-obligation interview just to see if we're a good fit, and then I develop a customized set of questions that help to identify, as we talked before, about the goals and about their interests and capturing if it's a memorial, the life story, if it's someone who's in transition, what their journey is about. And I may offer that to them as homework because they may be interested in a process, or we may do that together on the phone or in person. It depends on the circumstances. Obviously, someone who's got months to plan is different from a death that's just occurred and a funeral that's needed in short order. And then based on the material that I collect through the questionnaires and the interviewing, I start to create a draft. I typically will create an outline that includes all of the different elements of the ceremony, and then whether there are rituals and readings and involvement of other people, And then I create a full script, putting the meat on the bones, all of the words, and the client has full approval. We go back and forth, as many drafts as are needed, unlimited consultation through the process, for a set fee, and that's out of our belief that we don't want anybody to think, oh, this is on the clock, I can't ask for one more revision.
Right.
I don't want to pay more. And then in the case of, for example, a wedding or a funeral, I will coordinate with any vendors and the venue and provide cue sheets and conduct a rehearsal if needed, and really attend to every detail to make sure that the structure for the ceremony is fully set. And then in most cases, I will officiate it and conclude by providing my client with a beautiful keepsake copy of their ceremony.
Oh, that's really nice.
And typically, Jackie, that process is about 16 to 24 hours. It varies for each client, but it's very extensive. Most funeral or wedding officiants who don't come out of the life cycle celebrancy tradition may spend a couple of hours gathering information to plug into a fairly set template that they have and call it good. But my process is one that is much more in-depth.
Very good. Very good. And I would think their satisfaction would be much greater because you've spent such time personalizing it. And I would think that the act of personalizing it, where you're going through all of these questions in this interview, and that you're really helping people remember what it's all about, remember what emotions they want to express. If it's a funeral, remember things about people's lives. If it's a wedding, remember what they're there for. If it's a baby's birth, that they're thinking about, their hopes and dreams for having this child and why they brought this child into the world. So I would think that you move people to pretty deep thinking about the transition, the life transition that you're going to recognize at the ceremony. Is that true?
It's so true, Jackie. One of the, I get such amazing testimonials back from my clients. One that I had permission to include on my website was a woman who said, after we worked on the celebration of her mom's life, she said, I truly learned so much from you about the healing process. I felt my mom was with me almost as much in this process as when she was alive.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I would think that is the gift that you as a celebrant really bring to the ceremony, is helping people find the meaning, express the meaning, and articulate the meaning, and not feel silly about it. Sometimes I think in our world we feel uncomfortable talking about the meaning in passages, or even the meaning in what we're doing, and we just don't have the vocabulary, or if we have the vocabulary, we don't feel comfortable using it, and so we don't go there, and then it feels pretty superficial instead of important and powerful. So it sounds like maybe in your verbal training, that part of your training is to how to express the language, use the language, feel comfortable with the language of words of emotion and power. Is that true?
That's absolutely true. And what I try to do is use as many of the client's own words as possible. In the case of a memorial, for example, if there are letters that the deceased had written, to be able to pull from those so that it feels very authentic to the client. Often they have beautiful words, but they don't have confidence about their words. Another client reflected back to me, they said, Holly, it was such a pleasure to work with you. You listened to our needs and took what we said and turned it into what seemed like poetry, but they recognized that it was their poetry, not mine. So I think people don't experience me as like a super woo-woo kind of person. I'm very grounded. I know how to make the trains run on time, but I'm able to help connect them, as you said, to whether to them it's a sense of the sacred, the meaningful, in a way that, again, they are comfortable with. It's really organically connected to who they are and what they're looking for.
I think that's absolutely fabulous, and that it's quite a gift that you're bringing to people. So I know you go through this interview process, you draft a script, you write the script, and also deliver the ceremony, or perform the ceremony, I guess it would be. Do you also, in that process, do you help your clients kind of imagine and find the right location, the right setting, and other things that they might want to have? I mean, do you like food or flowers or music? And I mean, are you helping with that?
Well, one of the things I learned from Better, Smarter, Richer is to know your niche. And so I am clear with folks that I'm not an event planner, and I'm not going to actually have extensive contacts with all of the vendors if they are doing a full-fledged event, and I'll refer them to folks if they need that. But many of the clients that I'm working with are looking at a fairly small scale and intimate event. Sometimes it's really only going to be themselves and me as their witness. And then absolutely I help them envision the kind of setting. I might scout locations with them, if it might be an outdoor nature setting, and I lead them through the process of considering all of the elements that you described. And if they're in a kind of a DIY, do-it-yourself mode, then again I'm going to be their kind of person helping them think that through. But if they do need to take it to the next level in terms of event management, then they would seek a partner with an event planner.
And so in the good old Waterbug model, you probably have relationships with other businesses that were, flowers or candles or someone who sings or
absolutely
food people. Yeah. I mean, I know you don't want to do that yourself, but, we would create relationships for other people to do that.
Exactly, and then I work closely with them to coordinate that everything's going seamlessly once those other vendors are in place.
Oh, that's wonderful. So, Holly, you participated in a Better, Smarter, Richer study group. You talked to that a little bit for a minute. Did that help you focus and strengthen your career as a celebrant? Do you call upon that learning?
Absolutely. I just mentioned the niche piece, and the celebrant who introduced me into this work, whom I mentioned, describes herself as the Nordstrom of celebrants. That's really her personal style. And while I was going through the Better, Smarter, Richer study group, I thought, I think I'm the new Seasons of celebrants. I am local. I'm where you can get unpackaged food from the bins, but you can also get a name brand product. I can really help connect people to a variety of things that will meet their needs, and many different people can feel at home in a new season. But I think what I found of greatest value is the lesson that you really reinforce, that when people truly understand what you do and the value that you bring, they will wait for you. You don't need to go chasing after every single client, that you need to establish yourself clearly enough that the right clients will come to you and they'll wait for you. And I've really been surprised and gratified and very reinforced in this to find that people have actually altered their original ceremony dates in order to work with me. And that, I think, is because they really understand the specific value that I can provide to them as opposed to any other.
Which is unique to you. It's unique to you, and they want you. And so they'll wait to work with you and fit into your schedule. That is a fabulous part of people understanding the value that you personally bring to something. So congratulations. I think that's wonderful. Have you, I'm going to guess the answer to this is, oh my goodness, yes, but have you really found this work to be as rewarding as you hoped it would be?
Oh, so much, Jackie. It's actually opened up so many things in my life. I really now consider myself a rites of passage activist. I write a weekly blog on my website, which is hollypruettcelebrant.com, where I tell stories of ceremony and remembrance to give other people's ideas, really to help create more space in our culture for us to imagine this. And I am thrilled when people, again, I've mentioned the DIY do-it-yourself. If they want to do it themselves and they don't need me, I think that's great. I just want to see more of this happening, and for us to have venues in which we can share these stories and inspiration. And as part of really changing the way our culture deals, particularly with end of life, which I feel a special calling towards, I've co-founded and organized the Death Cafe in Portland, which is part of a global movement that brings people together in a conversational setting to talk about whatever is on their mind about death. So in addition to the direct client consultation that I do, I really find myself organizing in the community, using some of those skills that I have from my prior career, just to help open up more opportunity for us to develop creative rites of passage.
That's fabulous. So how do your clients find you? I mean, how do you market what you're doing, and how do they find you?
Well, I'm fortunate to be well known through my prior professional network, so there's a certain amount of word of mouth, and I think my blog really gives people a good sense of who I am and how I do my work. Search engines, I was careful to make sure that my website is optimized, and so people will find me through that. I do networking. I do the very occasional trade show. Just last weekend, I was at the Rainbow Wedding Network wedding show in anticipation of gay and lesbian couples in Oregon soon winning the freedom to marry. I've also offered workshops. The First Unitarian Church in town invited me to provide a 3-week series on creative rituals for changing times. And later in March, on Sunday, March 30th, the Villages Northwest Network has invited me to do a workshop on creative rituals for times of transition. And
wonderful.
So by offering those free workshops out in the community, it again both gives people the tools to develop more ideas themselves and a sense of my work.
Oh, that's wonderful. You know, there's 100 million people over the age of 50. And talk about a transition in your life into elderhood. And we have never in our society, at least in my lifetime, honored and recognized and valued elderhood. And as the baby boomer generation heads into elderhood, they're going to change all that, which is a good thing. And I think that's going to make many, many opportunities for ceremonies about changing where you live, heading into retirement, changing your lifestyle, downsizing your house, as well as, leaving life. And I think that the opportunities sound great to me, and I can understand why people like the churches and Villages Northwest would love to hear from you, because I think we're all going to say, wait a minute, this has been my life. I want to acknowledge and recognize what I have accomplished and what I am leaving behind and what I am going forward into. And it sounds like you're a perfect person to help them make that passage.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jackie.
Yeah. So if someone would love to contact you, I think we're about out of time, and I've loved our discussion, but if one of our listeners would like to contact you, can you give us your contact information? How can we get hold of you?
Yes, I encourage them to check out my website, which is www.hollypruettcelebrant.com. And I'm hoping they can find a link off of the radio broadcast as well. HollyPruettCelebrant.com. They can find my phone number on there. Give me a call. Send me an email. There's the right celebrant for every client. You just want to make sure it's a good fit. So if you like what you see on my website, please get in touch and let's brainstorm how we might celebrate and commemorate what's important in your life.
Well, I just have loved talking with you, Holly, and it seems to me that you make this process very rich, very customized for people, that you are understanding, learned, both educated about how to make the ceremony and very empathetic towards people also, that you are a gentle guide in all of this, and I think someone would put themselves very nicely into your hands if they decided to work with you and would feel very great because of that. So it's been terrific talking with you. And listeners, you're listening to Solo Pro Radio. This is Jackie B. Peterson. I'm your host today. And as you probably know, I'm the author of Better, Smarter, Richer, 7 Business Principles for Solo, Encore, and Creative Entrepreneurs. And I hope you will go to my website as well, www.bettersmarterricher.com. You can find these podcasts on my website. You can also download the free ebook on the 7 principles. You can join our conversation on the blog. We've got a pretty active conversation going. And also sign up for our free newsletters so that you can stay in touch with what's going on with the tribe of solopreneurs. We'd love to have you do that. And in the meantime, stay tuned in each week to Solo Pro Radio. We'd love to have you listen to these great conversations we're having with solos and encore entrepreneurs every week. In the meantime, have a wonderful week, and I look forward to talking with you next week. Goodbye.